Joke of the day.
Yeah.
How do Indians express shock?
And do that hello wobbly thing.
Oh no.
That's a good one. But apana. Holy cow. Get it? Cow. Holy.
Welcome back to On a Friday podcast, episode 18. And we're releasing this episode during Easter.
Yes.
So we believe you're hearing us. We pon okopoa during this period. We have Easter going on, Easter weekend. Ndo hii imefika mwisho wa mwezi kwanza, good timing on
Ramadhani inaenda kuisha, watu itie food.
Ramadhani inaendelea, tafadhali tunakulanga pilau.
Biriani, hizo zote.
Zote, sijui mshtaki mea nini, kila kitu. Mshikaki. That's the one. That's the
Bro,
one.
you're showing your
Mshikaki.
age.
Yes. So during that period, we wanted to have a conversation around going back to church or going to church, and just around why people don't go to church or what are people's thoughts around going to church. So that's what we're going to have today. And I'm Ron. I'm Pascal. Naangalia Ron.
Wow.
Nimeshindwa
Leo tumekuja Ron wangapi kwa studio?
Ron 2.
Yes.
Nikopa na danganya.
Hi, Ron 1. I'm Ron 1.
I'm Pascal. And for this conversation, you have a guest, Gilbert.
Yes, my name is Gilbert. You can call me Gilo. Glad to be here.
Nice. We brought in Gilbert for this conversation ndio to help tuangalie maybe a different point of view enye si hatuoni. And maybe the first question too comes to that from your experience as you're a youth church leader.
Yeah. You can say so, yes.
You can say so. How would you
else
put it?
can you say it?
How
can
would
I
you
say it?
put it?
Yes.
Okay, well, I'm not, let's say, a church leader to say, but I work amongst the youth in church and in churches. So I am not per se a leader, like you would say I'm a clergy. No, but I work amongst the youth.
Okay.
Yes.
From your interaction with youth, how do they perceive the church?
Things have changed over time. How do they perceive the church? Church is important. That's one. I can say the church is important. Two is church is a place where you go when you are behaving well. So that's that. So if you're behaving badly, then don't go to church. So that's also a perception.
Yeah.
Then there's a part where all things pertaining life happen in church. So weddings happen in church, funerals will happen in church. So therefore, it's a body where all your important rites of passage will happen. So that's one perception. That's another perception that they have.
When you interaction with them and so kuja church and they are church goer every Sunday or
Almost every
Sunday.
and plus other days. I know you kuna enough days zingine pia watu bado
prayers
wanaenda.
on Wednesdays.
Yes.
Yeah.
So what's their commitment like kukuja every time you're
Every
supposed
time.
to be there?
Okay, again, I said that over time we've seen a lot of changes. So way back when I was growing up, I'm not that old, but I am not that young either. We would be in church, we would clean, would arrange the benches, would be there to cut grass and all. So the level of participation was very high.
Yeah.
There was nowhere else you would go to. But over time, things have come up. So you've got options. There are malls, there are football gigs to play, things to go do. So because of that, then there's a division of your concentration and what you can put yourself to. And therefore, what has happened is that I've noted that over time, the commitment level has gone down. And depending on things like distance to church, where you're going to school, what kind of school you go to, all these things have changed. So I've noted that there's been a drop in terms of participation in church. Then, of course, there's also what you call the New Age movement. So I can believe in God, I don't have to come to church, really. So that's also happening. Therefore, there's a significant drop. Again, town the metropolitan and out of town, there's a difference as well. Shags, you will find many people going to church. They're committed. After all, you're either at home or at church.
Awana malls,
yes.
awana hizo vitu zingine simu ya kuenda.
Now, church is more peaceful than home. So you'd rather be at church. Therefore, but in town, there are too many things to distract
I
you.
totally get that. I do feel there is competition for church time. Church is reserved for Sunday. The reason kwa kusema others because I know I grew up Catholic. So kwetu nilikuwa naenda church mara 3 nikiwa mtoto. Sunday definitely. Sunday definitely. Uko hapo morning hadi afternoon. Sato tulikuwa na practice za vitu either za youth meet ama za altar boys ama za dancers.
I'm gonna drama.
Altar boy.
Yes.
Nilikuwa altar boy, bro.
Let that be known. Pascal was once an altar boy.
Ama drama. So Sato kuna activities ka hizo.
Yes.
Alafu Catholics we have jumuia. So in the middle of the week, Thursday, you'll have sijui how else to describe jumuia, like a congregation, like a small group of people in wanaishi. So it's based on where you stay.
So like small cell groups.
Yes, it's basically like cell groups. Yes.
So mtaenda meet at someone's house or a designated place and have a prayer, read the word, someone gives a sermon, kuna sadaka bado.
So hiyo sadaka mnapea nani? Huko mali mmehostiwa.
Hiyo sasa either ni mwenye amehost ndo anapewa ama inaingia kwa jumuia the group. That one doesn't go to the main church. Hiyo ni yenyu hapo.
Mnajitengenezea kata tu hapo.
Kuna kanisa ya Sunday na kuna ya Thursday. So I grew up with all these different, like going to church 3 times. And then as I got older, other things came up and any more priority. Ndio yenye wamesema kuna malls, especially for young people. And it's a Saturday. So Saturday ni either ako home, which is one activity, whatever you'll do at home, or church and engage in activities at church, or they go somewhere else with their friends. Now they rise your malls, biking, outdoor stuff, hiking.
Alafu siku hizi a lot of events zinaekwa Sundays.
Events,
especially on Sundays. They really cram a lot of events on Sundays.
Ama hata wenye hawana do na kwenda kufanya all these activities, wana take your time too off kwenda kwa mall. Ushaona venye malls huja Sunday? TRM na Garden City muzi ogopa on Sundays.
From Fridays, actually Fridays through Saturday to Sunday, you will find a lot of that.
But watu wanaendanga mall kufanya?
Sijui, lakini ni wengi.
Out of curiosity.
It's a cool hangout place. It's a cool hangout place.
I remember that nikiwa high school na for us ilikuwa Junkie na Kumat Junction, food court. Everything used to happen at food court. Ulikuki hata kuenda food court. Ni mastori unakula. Watu walienda kujibamba. So, but for some reason it never resonated with me. Alafu venye umemention you grew up Catholic, not that I don't know. But nakumbuka one thing that I usually envied with Catholics was the structure that you guys have. And I think the first time it really popped out for me ilikuwa tukiwa high school. High school ilikuwa service ya YCS iko na specific time it starts and a specific time it ends. Kainaisha 10:30, your service itaisha 10:30. Kuja see you.
The spirit leads, man.
See you kwanza. There's an interesting story about that. There's an interesting story about that.
Umeenda see you saa 3 asubuhi lakini bado
exactly.
High risk ya kupata lunch ya saa.
Imagine umeenda saa 3.
Unakula neno.
So there's this specific pastor, this specific youth pastor. He used to come to our high school to preach. Ilifika point where he used to come on, we used to have a kesha on Friday. Kulikuwa na some service on Friday, some service on Saturday, alafu now Sunday.
Like we can challenge.
Not really we can challenge, but tulikuwa tu na like kunaweza kuwa na short prayer on Friday, alafu Saturday mnakuwa na like a mini service, alafu Sunday now the main service. But when he used to come, Friday mtaka dining hall mpaka saa 7 usiku. Saturday mkai dining hall hadi saa 7 usiku.
Seeking the face of the Lord.
Imagine. Alafu Sunday pia service inaanza 9. Alafu inafika like 1:30, alafu najua it's a boys school. Usipofika dining hall on time, food, wejua food yako haiko. alafu now for this specific pastor, the reason I remember him, alikuwa let's say hiyo Saturday usiku, like there's this specific Saturday he came, akaanza kupreach, then ikafika like saa 6 watu wanasikia usingizi, wanaanza kutoka, akaanza kusema, you know, the devil is convincing some of you that sleep is more important than the word of God. Hadi akaambia watu wafunge mlango, hakuna mtu anatoka. He didn't care that a majority of the congregation that he had for that specific session, they were sleeping anyway, so they weren't listening. But he alikuwa tutakaa hadi nimalize kupreach. So ikafika point where mlikuwa mkimwona Friday, unajua Saturday siendi, Sunday siendi, na ngoja next week
utakuwa Catholic.
Otherwise, yes, this week mini mkatho. Nikionekana nje na teacher on duty nawambia, haya ujui mi wewe unakuanga, si unawambia hapana,
nilichange
sister ya mamangu aliolewa kwa mkatho. Sa hiyo ndo nilichukua last week. But yeah, I remember envying that kind of structure. And I think that's one thing I've come to like about, or I think it's generally also because I'm a very time sensitive person. Pascal will tell you, spend you waste your time. So when growing up, nilikuwa na feel ni kama, at least that was my perception. It was like the church wasn't respecting my time, because tumeagree service, first service or second service nisha saa 7. Why are you keeping us till 3:30? I just don't understand. Alafu another thing I used to hate when I was a kid ilikuwa every time nikienda church after skipping like one Sunday or two, I have to reintroduce myself. Now me, I was a quiet kid. I don't want to come and stand in front of people every time. Oh, hi, my name is Ron.
I wasn't here last Sunday. Why?
Exactly. So from a very early age, I started going to main church. Nearly skip most of my Sunday school. Teens,
youth nini.
I never went to teens church nikiwa a teenager. Mi nilienda straight nini. Alafu now when I was in high school, I tried going back to teens. Sijui kama ushai notice. Ukizoea main church, ukirudi teens, unaona watu wako na utoto
sana. You've matured.
Like
you've matured.
Umezoea pastor kipreach, everyone has their Bible open, or kama uko kwa simu ni Bible, you follow the teaching nini. Pastor na make joke, at least hata you are present to hear the joke and laugh. Then in teens church naona watu wanakatiana, watu wanaonyeshana Facebook. At that time ilikuwa Facebook, sijui Facebook nini
bado iko
like you people are so childish. You're not respecting God's time. You're not respecting God's time. But Pascal, how was your experience growing up in church? That's confidential information.
Mine was good. I was born and raised in the church. My entire family. Paraphrasing, whatever. That's
we know churches have midwives.
So my entire family got very strict about that. My mom, full staunch Catholic. My dad, staunch Catholic. They're involved in the church. We were having conversation here why people use church, and I feel for them they've wrapped their entire life around church. So for me, I also got lost with church after high school. Nikiwa high school niko hapo because I'm in church at school. Nikirudi home, I lost your structure nilikuwa nayo because we moved. So pia mimi didn't have a place to go to at home. So church ilikuwa nikiwa shule. So when we moved as a family, they still wrapped their lives around the new church. We got a new church and kwangu ilikuwa hard to
adjust.
But they still picked up a new one. They got leadership responsibilities on it. Wakaanza kufundisha, wakaanza sijui kazi nyingi na shida zimetoka wapi.
Hizo mafunzo zilikuwa zinakufikia wewe kwa nyumba, wanafundisha watu wengine uko nje, wewe zinakufikia.
So see always ilikuwa church, always hadi isai. So they are still very much in the church. Church is at the center of their life. On Saturday when they need an activity ni wapo church. Wakienda retreat church, Sunday church, Friday church,
Wednesday church.
Yes, it's their thing. It's their thing. For me iliacha kuwa a core. It really does feel bad saying that. It feels bad.
Sijali, we
But
don't
it
judge.
did. It stopped being the central part of my life, and it became another aspect of it. So the same way I have school, academic stuff,
Yeah.
I also have church and spiritual stuff to look for, but it's no longer, I don't feel like it's the core of my life.
Yeah.
Yeah, hapo ndo niko sai.
I have an interesting question for you, Gilbert.
Yes.
Do you okay, not try kuuliza hii swali without it being leading. How was your experience with the church in your early 20s? Teens, early 20s, mid.
Huko mali watu wanapotea wanapotea in high school.
Yeah. For you.
Okay. My again, just like for Pascal, I grew up in the church. I'm Presbyterian. That's how I've been brought up. So primary school, Presbyterian, everything we did was Presbyterian. Hymns were at parade time and all through that entire period. Both my parents were teachers. So and my dad was very active in church. So one way or the other, I found myself, of course, in Sunday school. And when I'm in Sunday school, and once or twice the teacher wouldn't come.
Yeah.
So then everyone looks at you because your dad is the church leader. You must be able to share something.
Yeah.
So I found myself thrown into that space where I was doing some Sunday school classes here, there. Then the teachers would come. They're like, "Oh, sorry, I came late. Oh, okay, continue." So and then I'll finish the lesson.
Yeah.
So I got introduced into church ministry that way at that point, teaching my peers, then now teaching the younger kids, which then took me through to high school. High school, I went to a Catholic school, and there, CU, I was on and off CU. I wasn't much very active. I had some friends who were very active. I only became active in fourth form. And in fourth form, that's because KCSE was coming. So you're there.
Nakumbuka hiyo time hapo ndo watu walikuwa
Hapo tuko
wanaokoka.
tunaomba kabisa.
Yes.
Now,
Atu huo pastor angekuja hiyo time singemind.
Watu walikuwa wanaokoka kila
Hiyo time,
wiki.
Let the spirit of the Lord come because I need it.
then my mom was very strict. So my mom was law. So you're going to church or you're going to church.
Yes.
There was no option.
There's no option.
So, and I think it's not those ones of you must go to church because I say so, because it's a good thing if you learn about God. So that was very well brought out for me.
Yeah.
So I got involved in church from a very early age. So through my teenage age, whatever things we did, drama, dancing, I was in a dance team. I don't look like it, but yes, I was in a dance team. Tuko tunaitwa Dynamites. Cheza na sisi. So we were in, so I was active during that time. I was teaching Sunday school and all. Went to campus. Again, then I was in JKUAT. I was out in active ministry, but I was attending church. Actually, two different churches. One was because there was a Bible study. I was at Bapo, and then there was a youth service at NPC where I used to go that time. So
Nasikia watu wanachukua churches mbili.
Imagine, man,
because there was
moja.
something here that wasn't here. We had Bible study here, we had fellowship here. So una combine. Unaenda service ya asubuhi huku, mkimaliza unaenda hii side ingine.
That is the definition of dedication.
So we and actually most of my friends today,
Yeah.
that's where we hapo ndio tulipatana na wao. So that was my experience. Now I like something Pascal mentioned here. It's an interesting thing that when you're in your teenage years, you fail now to find an ownership of your own faith, because before it was your parents, they're active and it's sometimes because they're active, mnaenda asubuhi, mnatoka jioni. So you start hating the church because it's taking too much of your parents' time, it's taking too much of your time, as you're saying. They don't respect time and all. But I think it comes from church to church. There are some churches that are very strict on time.
Yes.
And therefore, because of that, you'll get in at 7 and they've got like 3 services. So it's 7 to 8:30.
Yes.
Inatoka. So hakuna space ya kuongeza na nini. So those guys in that church, they'll have no problem with time. But others, wanaingia 9, it's as a spirit leads.
Yes.
Tutamaliza roho akisema tumemaliza. So and therefore you find the teenager and the young adult, if they it was not built well at the fundamentals part of their faith, it's difficult for them to continue on their own in their later teen years.
I was just to ask a follow-up question on that, because you have mentioned you have worked with a lot of young people through the years. For those who have a challenge at some point in their lives with the concept of religion, church, and God, what are some of the most common reasons they give for having that challenge? Is it kama mimi nilikuwa na feel time church is not respecting my time? Is it they found other things to do? Like, what are some of the most common reasons you have come across?
Okay. One of them is time. We stay too long in church. So I'm tired, I'm hungry.
Yeah.
I've got some other things I need to do.
Yeah.
That's one that I've seen a lot. Two is the point where some teenagers feel they don't belong. So once I'm in this youth service and I don't feel like I belong here, there's some cool guys and I'm not accepted.
Kuna kwangana cliques
Hakuna cliques,
in youth
yes.
church.
So, yes.
Yeah.
Or your family is deemed to be well-to-do, therefore they look at you in a different view.
Yeah.
So you also feel you don't belong. So that happens a lot within churches in the metropolitan setup. So there's that part, not belonging. There's a part of time. 3 is what the guys are teaching. You don't relate with it. You feel this thing we are being told the same thing in 4 different so you feel it's being repeated over and over again, and kwani there are no other things we can learn. So because of that, then it's boring. It's getting boring. There's many more good things happening out there than are happening in church. And then there's the actual part of rebellion where I want a cool church. Nataka, I have been seeing there are cool churches out there. So kwetu tunakuja mazee, tunaketi chini, tunaimba nini, yule pastor anakuja ni yule tu tunajua. We even know atatumia ile sermon ya 2 Sundays ago tumetrikiwa. So I want a cool church. So there's that thing about coolness, which then has now taken a point where it's changed the foundation of the faith of the teens, because the church has in wanting to try and give you what you want, they have diluted the truth. Therefore, you now have gotten the truth told to you the false truth told to you over and over again. That, but when you go out there, now you start realizing, but I thought you were told. So you find a very shaky person. They go into their young adult age and they really don't have something to hold on to. Whereas if it was done from their early ages, they're able to build a good foundation.
Pascal,
Nice.
uko na kitu.
I'm like, yes. Those are the reasons. I was going to ask. I was going to ask why, because from this conversation and even from our own interactions, we see the generation before us, our parents, they raised us in the church. Very few people utapatana now when they weren't forced to go to church as a kid. As an African child, as a Kenyan, ulichapa, whether Christian, Catholic, Muslim, Presbyterian, ulichapa ndo ende church. So we were all raised kujua church ni nini. We know what religion means. Again, different religions pia. But over time, through the years, watu hupotea. Looking at people right now who are much older, 20s and above, unapata even few of them go to church. Yet, they were brought up in the church. And I agree with those ones. Now, those are the reasons why. Now, that, for me, in Fungwa Macho, that adds up ya mbona watu hawaendi church.
Can I add one more? Parenting styles have changed. Some of the parents, wale ambao walichapwa kuchapwa, the devil was beaten out of them. So there's no more devil in them.
Anachapa shetani.
Alichapwa kabisa. Siwe nachapa shetani. So those ones the devil was beaten out of. Now you find that they gotten to a point they said, I will not take my child through what I was taken. So they've been given the choice. Okay, utautekwa na church baba, usiende. Now, because of that, then it's not been made important. You'll still find guys who are in their 40s now, who are raised by now the parents who are 80s. My dad is 80. That's the age. The church was made such a core element of my life that anything you do, you start a business, I have to call the pastor to come bless his business. I get this, I have to get someone. But now over time, it's gone down. It's been watered down. And as it's going way down, then it is being watered further and further. And you'll find even parents who said, I'm traveling, because now there's a lot of traveling and a lot of the kind of work exposure that the parents have. The parents are not there on Sundays, so who takes you to church? So all those things are changing. So church is not such an important thing. But
Yeah.
way back, church was the
only
only
thing.
thing.
Yes.
Yeah.
Yes. So what else are you doing on Sunday?
Umenikumbusha, there's a time, because I think I wasn't a problematic kid growing up, even in my teenage years. But my mom can attest, the one thing tulipigana naye ni kanisa. And I don't think at that time we had a good relationship for me to clearly explain to her why I didn't like to go to church. But pia mi household ilikuwa either uende church ama uende church. Kumbuka kuna siku tuliletana juu hadi akaniambia sawa, hautaki kwenda church, basi haukai kwa nyumba, toka nifunge. So it happened once. Then the next time, by the time it happened next, I had made a copy of the keys.
Ngoja mara kwanza ulienda wapi?
Nilikaa tu nje, nilikaa tu kwa stairs hadi akarudi.
Does she know that?
I hope she doesn't listen to this. But yeah, nikameka copy, alafu nikakaa nayo. So akatoka, akaingia kwa gari, akatoka naona gari ikavigile kona, nikaingia. Alafu najua kumtime, najua church inaisha saa 8, alafu she doesn't know how to keep time. So atakuja like 3:30, 4.
Atamaliza onge na watu.
Atapiga na story.
Wapatane na nini.
Apatane na
mama mwingine.
Exactly.
Yes, after church fellowship.
After church fellowship. Yeah, alafu arudi. So nimekumbuka that. But for me personally, najua, I think one of the main reasons why for a long time in my life nearly detached from the church was, I don't know exactly where that detachment happened, but at some point it felt like what was being taught in the church, and I think it reflects one of the reasons ume mention, what I was being taught in church, it wasn't practical in my life. It was like nikienda church, I'm dealing with a spiritual world. Alafu nikitoka church, nakuja sa physical world. Now nikifika kwa physical world, I don't have the tools za kudeal with the physical world from the teachings zenye nime get from the spiritual world. So ilikuwa ina feel as if I'm dealing with two different worlds. Then at some point, I think nilikuwa 2021-22 hapo. Nikajikalisha chini. Kajiambia, okay, what direction do you want to take? Because hapo unaweza mwatu, you know what, all this doesn't make sense.
Wachane nayo.
Niachane nayo. But one thing, I think how I approached it was, I made it clear to myself that I don't have a good enough understanding of the Bible and Christianity for me to denounce it. Like hata scientifically, that doesn't make sense. You don't refute something you don't understand.
True.
Yeah. So that's the first thing nikasema. You know what? Let me admit my inaitwaje? Ignorance. Let me admit my ignorance. I don't know. Well, yeah, I'm not well conversant with it for me to say this doesn't make sense.
Yeah.
So how do I establish if it makes sense or not? Let me try to study it a bit more. So that at the end of it, neza amua, it doesn't make sense, but you can really put your effort.
Yeah.
Yaku, try to understand.
understand. Yes.
Try to understand it. Then one thing I've noticed about my life, by the way, God always answers my prayers. Sometimes he answers them later than I would have wished, but he answers my prayers. So your time, it was like a prayer. It was like I was making a prayer. Nikuwa na a better understanding of the Bible. Then that's the time I came across, we have mentioned that series, lecture series from Dr. Jordan Peterson. He's a clinical psychologist. He doesn't have a religious background. But how he was explaining the biblical stories, it made so much sense that by the time I was going to church, when I hear the pastor explain the same story, in my head nafikiria like, that's such a shallow, like, haujaniambia anything.
Utakuinua mkono.
Like, niko na points. Nataka ku. Yeah, so nika realize for a lot of the teachings that we were, not a lot of the teachings, how the teachings were being articulated, because it's the how, not the teaching itself. How it was like the same things we were being taught from the time I was 6 years old. At 6 years old, it made sense to my 6-year-old world, you know. But nikifika 19, 20, 15 years later, kuna venye that it has to be, the story has to be a bit more complicated to accommodate the life I'm currently living. True. And I felt like the biblical series, that lecture series, ilikuwa na explain like that. It was giving me, going back to my initial point, it was giving me tools that I could use in the physical world that I'm currently living in. Yeah.
Practical, making it like
Very
converting
practical.
what you are learning on the Bible and history
Yes.
to things that you can do in your day to
You
day.
can relate with.
Yeah,
Yes.
nakumbuka kwanza a lesson that stood out for me ilikuwa his lecture on the story of Cain and Abel. So for a long time, all the years I've been to church, ilikuwa tu, Cain was Abel's brother, then he got jealous, then he killed him, then he was cursed, then he was akaekiwa mark, mtu asikuguze. Like the story was the same old, ever since nikuwe Sunday school. But how he explained it was, I'll explain it briefly. Abel was an ideal. And at least to Cain, he was doing everything right. He was doing the right things to please God. So he was the ideal. He was doing the right things. Now, Cain could have approached that one of two ways. Either to look at the ideal, okay, what is it that Abel is doing that I'm not doing? Then emulate the
Emulate it.
ideal.
Yes.
But how he decided to approach it was to kill the ideal so that he doesn't have...
There's nothing to compare.
there's nothing to compare to. So the main lesson there was, in your life, there's some things, nikiangalia Pascal is successful in a certain area that I want to be successful in. I can approach it in one of those two ways. Either niangalie, what is Pascal doing that I'm not doing, then emulate that as an ideal. Or, neza sema tu, he was born in a rich background, so I look for reasons
Silver
to kill
spoon
that. So I look for reasons to kill that ideal so that I don't have to look at Nini.
Yeah.
That's a new way. That's an interesting way.
Exactly. And
I'd go to that church.
Yes.
Yeah, and his lesson there was, in a lot of times when you kill the ideal, the consequences are not good. Basically what happened to Cain.
Yes, yeah.
So ilinifungua nini. So nikirudi church nikisikia pastor explain bado Cain, Abel brothers,
Sin, fast sin, don't kill, jealousy.
There's
You're
something
like,
deeper.
Yes.
Pastor, can I say something? Pastor? Yes, yeah. And then you could pick up from what you're saying. That when you say that you went to the adults church for a long time during your teen years, then when you go to teens church, you find they're not at your level.
Yeah,
that happens a lot, and I've seen that. I've worked in churches. I have worked along churches because I said I work amongst the youth workers and youth pastors to help them develop content for their teens and all. One of the things I've seen is a lot of perception or perceptions of that the teens hawataelewa hizi vitu. So tusiwapateke to thick sana. These guys want it at their level. What's their level? These guys are at a point, because of if you look at the teenage from age 13 to 19, that's the point when they're thinking critically. Therefore, that's when they will question.
Yes.
And that's the best
You're
time to introduce
everything.
the point, the Sunday school verses that they learned, 0 to 12, now it's when to make them practical.
Yes.
So you're told, do not kill. So here I'm telling you, this is what it means. This is what it translates to. Even looking at someone badly, you've killed him. So I'm telling you, your spiritual and physical world, they are the same thing. So I can't tell you, wacha nieke Yesu kando. Or tell me, don't bring Jesus into this. How do I not bring him into this? So there's a lot of that, and it's a lie. That is, of course, let me say from the devil, that the teenagers will not understand. But actually they will and question things. And some pastors will not want to delve into it because they know their teens are going to ask the questions and they themselves are not ready to respond to them. So because it's a way of hiding their incompetence or their lack of understanding in terms of some of the things. So it's important to also realize that that's one of the things that has changed the teenagers' perception. The pastor he's not equipped. So he kanisa, pastor ako shallow. Yes.
Actually, you have transitioned into a very good nini yenye nilikuwa nataka ku ask about. Kuna this tendency, and not just in young people, in older people as well, where they equate the religious leader with the church. Like they don't dissociate. And you were having an argument. There's a lady I was having this conversation with. She's very entrenched into her church, and her church had some scandal. Her church was related to another church in another country that had some scandal. So she had a very deep attachment to the religious leader who was criticized. So tukihavyo conversation, nili notice a lot of times ilikuwa when I criticize the religious leader, she takes it as if I'm criticizing
Personal.
her church.
Yes.
But I was trying to explain to her, your church, okay, put your church aside. I'm talking about this specific person. Like, don't you think some of the things that he's doing or he has been accused of doing, at least they need someone to look into them. It's equal to, he's a man of God. We shouldn't question men of God and all that. So what kind of take do you have on that? Your tendency, do you think it's a good idea?
Okay, now when we see that happening, you're seeing a diversion from the person of God or the person of Christ towards me as the pastor. So you will hear my pastor said. When you hear more of what the pastor said rather than what God said, this Sunday to enter church, then there's already a disconnect. And therefore, if I do something, because you already hold me in a higher position, then you will defend me. It's just a natural thing. We see parents defending their children.
Yes.
We've seen in many court cases, a person is accused of something, but their parents always hang with them. Huyu hapana, aliwekelewa. So you find them defending them. It's a natural thing where we defend people who we believe in. And therefore you will find congregants supporting. We've seen churches having wrangles based on property, and you'll see factions. This one's this one and this one. So where is God in that?
Yes.
And one of the things that again you find in amongst the youth is a sense of justice, which is very high during the teenage years. You've been telling me not to do this, but that's exactly what you're doing. One time I went out with some teens, and it was a family group of about 10 families. And the parents had told me, they sat me down and told me, now, tukienda hii weekend, we were out Masai Mara, please talk to our kids about lying. See, they lie. In fact, I hope they tell you the correct names. So listen to them. All right. So when we sat with the kids, I told them, okay, let me tell you, I've got 7 things I've been told to talk to you guys. Tell me what you feel. Number 1, lying. Number 2, laziness. Number 3. So one of the girls laughed. He said, Wongo. That must be my mom. So I didn't know their parents based at that point. So I said, where do you think it was you? Hey, my mom keeps saying I lie so much. So I'm like, so is it true? Well, sometimes you have to defend yourself. So she gives her explanation as to why she does it. Then she says, but let me ask you, when my mom is called and us guys are heading in direction B, and she says, we are heading direction A, we'll be there shortly, and we are still in the house. We're still in the house. Yes, you won't
Yeah.
So now you see, now they start, now children might not criticize or critique your question, their theories, but teenagers will. They'll start asking you, that's when they start getting their sense of fashion. You buy them this, it stays there, it will not be worn for a long time. Then you realize, like, I don't like blue, actually, I like green. So they're starting. So at that point is when we should, as pastors and youth workers, help them to interrogate the scriptures to the point where they understand them, so that if I, as their pastor, make a mistake, then I've made a mistake as a human being. I'm not the church. The church, after all, is us. It's the community. There's the institution, the church, yes, but then they should be able to differentiate and accept it that, yes, he made a mistake, just like I would make a mistake. And also help the pastors also understand and they educate their followers and the teens particularly that I am not Jesus. Therefore, I live in a sinful world. I am bound to make a mistake. We are in this journey together. So if you see me do something and I'll give a small example. One time I was helping out some place who were doing a sound. And we went to pick some equipment somewhere in Ngumo. On our way back, there's a car that joined the road so badly. And the guy we're with was in shock. So he didn't say a thing. Then I'm like, kwani umestukaje ni umse? It's not the way the guy came into the road. Man, that's my youth pastor. That was his shock.
Yeah.
So when you go to church, do you know you're still looking at him as of
You almost
knew where.
it's you.
driving badly.
Yeah. So we are not help them also understand that the pastors are human. They can make mistakes, but we're in this journey together. If I make a mistake, please come tell me. That's my take. Help them understand and integrate scriptures.
True. I do feel sad because I do know several people when they've seen the pastor do something bad, and even on the Catholic side, they've seen a priest do something bad, do a really bad sin, enye hata wanajua tunakunywanga na ule father. Sambona niende church Sunday.
Kwanza Catholics na pombe.
So that really gets so deep in them, they stop going to church. Fully due to father anakunywa, a priest is drinking, ama walikuwa with a pastor kwa club. Iyo tu inafanya we do really struggle with that. So we judge them very harshly and very heavily because of who they are and the position they hold, and we expect a lot from them. It's sour, they sin, and we live in a sinful world. I like that, true. But
do you think that's justified?
No, it's not justified.
Like them being held to a higher standard. Let me phrase it like that.
Yes,
them
a very
being
high
held to
standard.
a higher standard.
Actually, it is very justified. Why? Because scripture says, I left my Bible. Scripture tells us that when you choose to take up leadership, you go into a higher calling, and much more is expected of you.
Yeah.
Therefore, you cannot be ordinary. Let me give another example. Again, Paul talks about if you're in the army, you do not involve yourself with civilian matters.
Yeah.
You're in a higher. So the same way, we don't expect to see a drunk policeman. The first time I saw an image of a drunk policeman, my mind refused.
Didn't compute.
My mind refused to comprehend. It looked so the uniform versus his behavior.
Yeah.
It looked so.
It doesn't add up.
It refused to add up. Yeah, it refused to add up.
Yes.
So so the same thing. That calling, yes, they must be held to account because of where the position that they have. But two, they are not God. So when they make a mistake, we ought to not defend them in their mistake, but to be able to correct them or pray for them to get to a point of self-correction.
Umenikumbusha a very silly thing that I've just remembered from my childhood. The first time I saw a woman smoking, my God, nilichelewa shule. Nilisimama tu kwa barabara and like, women smoke. Because all through my childhood, and I grew up around a lot of women. My aunts, my mom, my grandmother, none of them used to smoke. A few of them used to drink once in a while, but never smoking. And my grandfather used to smoke. So at least I had that expectation. Men smoke. It's na ukipita tu kwa barabara. Wanaume tu wana smoke. So the first time I actually came across a woman smoking, ilikuwa like, I didn't think you people do that.
How did you explain it to the teacher in school? Niliona
kitu mpya kai
okay, nilichapwa, but in my head it was justified. It was like I saw something new today. So I get your point. And personally, that's what I also believe on a personal level. I think depending on the responsibility you have taken, you have taken that responsibility with the expectations that come with it. Be it religious leaders, be it police officers, be it politicians. There's a certain way I expect a holder of quote unquote that office to behave. So that's how I'm going to look at you. I'm not going to look at you as just a normal person. You are no longer Pascal to me. You are a pastor. Why are you doing that? So personally, I would judge you more harshly than mtu tu mwenye
uko tu nje.
Uko tu uko nje. Niko like, okay, that's bad, but okay, sawa. You don't but ukikuwa a religious leader, I mean, I look up to you when it comes to teaching and guidance. So why are you doing this?
True.
That's just how I look at it.
As we wind up, for me, I do believe the church is important. Through and through. I believe it's important for your well-being, the same way you need academics, the same way you need to look after your mental health, your social health, you'll also need to look after your spiritual side.
Yeah.
And I try very, very hard to ensure it's among the key things I'm looking at for myself. How I'm doing academic-wise, how I'm progressing with work, and how my spiritual well-being is coming along.
Yeah.
And that includes going to church, praying, doing good by the Bible that I believe in. Yeah, and just doing that kind of thing. Kenye mini mela, kenye me I dropped out of is the social interaction part of it. So going to church, I go to church alone. And nikitoka natoka kwa nyumba yangu.
Singular, ukiwa peke yako.
Ni mimi na Mungu wangu nimeingia, nimeongea na Mungu wangu, tumeonana, we are
Utatoa
good.
wapi bibi bro?
Yes, and
Where will you get
true, nitaje kurudi hizo. So you see, that's another thing that I think is good for the church, because it gives you that avenue to have a social interaction with the people who are like-minded.
Yes.
So that's what the church is for me.
Okay. Because you've said in conclusion, so let me my concluding remarks. Church plays an important role in everyone's life. Why? First, there's a spiritual aspect, because we are all made. You see, we, unlike the rest of creation that was spoken into being, you see, God spoke everything into being, but then when it came to creation of man, he spoke to himself. He says, let us make man in this. So we carry an aspect of God, which is fellowship. Therefore, you cannot live in an isolated, so you have to be part of a fellowship. And there's a question that's always asked. It is not what whether man will worship, but what man will worship. So we will always worship something.
That's very true.
And whatever way it is. So in that way, then you find that it serves the spiritual fulfillment of a human being. Two, there is the part where it brings the sense of community. And, you know, when you always have someone who you look up to in times of trouble, who God, of course, tells us he is, then you have a sense of security. And you're able to know that at any time, I will always have someone who I can go up to. Therefore, church is important. And for the many teens and young adults that I speak to, I tell them, find a way to come back. It's never too late to come to church. Please come back.
As you are.
As you are. Because God doesn't judge you.
Na hizo pia
yes. Whatever happens, na kila kitu, we kuja tu vile uko, because God looks at the heart. After all, when we die, we leave our bodies here. It's the spirit that is going to take. So come back to church. It's never too late. Good things happen in church. I can tell you that for sure. Yes.
I like the gems you're dropping. We live in a sinful world, so kuja tu, we're all here. There's another one I had. What was it? It was a really funny term. Afterlife insurance. Don't come to church for afterlife insurance.
Yes. Deka ya mwisho.
So kuja mapema. And get to have a personal interaction with.
The thing with this conversation is it can go for hours.
Yes.
And I think maybe at some point we might bring back a part 2 and come to discuss it. But for today, hayo tu tulikuwa nayo. You can find us on Instagram, on YouTube, on... Kuna hii tumeingia juzi. AfriPods. Yes.
Okay.
We are moving. So we have AfriPods
Facebook
as well.
Bado iko. So sisi tuko Facebook.
Sisi hatuko Facebook. You can search on a Friday podcast, you'll find us. Where mtu tu akikuwa ameguzwa na hii episode, amwe to let me reach out to this man. Atakupata wapi?
Ukikuja Facebook utanipata my full names, Gilbert Njoroge. Full names.
That's how you know his age.
Na kuna avatar hapo ni
hakuna space, hakuna dot,
hakuna the real person. Yes.
Okay, nice.
Pascal, unapatikana wapi? Church.
Kwa kanisa. Yes.
Okay. That was it from us. Thank you everyone for taking...
Have a happy Easter. If you're listening to this during Easter.
Na mtuite Ramadan.
Yes. When you want to have Ramadan, you do Fitri. Si do Fitri.
Iyo Eid.
Ramadan Mubarak.
Yes. Right. Thanks, guys.
Bye.
Thanks. Bye.
Oh, baby.